This episode of Hellbent for Horror is brought to you by Patreon supporters and listeners like you. If you enjoy Hellbent for Horror, please consider supporting the show by contributing either on our Patreon site or via PayPal. You can find links to both of those on hellbentforhorror.com. And I thank you for helping to sustain the show. Hi, and welcome to Hellbent for Horror, a podcast devoted to all things related to horror. I'm S.A. Bradley, and I'm a lifelong movie lover, but my heart belongs to horror. My biggest thrill, however, is getting to talk to people about this stuff. I really want to start conversations with you. Before I jump into the show, I wanted to thank the folks at Texas Frightmare Weekend and the Hyatt Regency Hotel staff in Dallas for a great show and great hospitality. You know you're at a good convention when the hotel staff dresses up and they put fake blood on the elevator walls. And I wanted to say hello to listeners Will Forsyth and Phantom Dark Dave DeBose. I'm sorry we didn't get to connect during the convention, but I think I'll be going back to that one again. And I want to thank listener Brandon Humphreys for contributing to the show through PayPal. Thank you so much. It really means a lot, and I'm so glad that the show resonates with you. And this year's Etheria Film Night will be held on June 3rd at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood as a special presentation of the American Cinematheque. Etheria Film Night is the world's most respected showcase of new horror, comedy, science fiction, fantasy, action, and thriller films made by emerging women directors. And I'm honored to be one of the judges this year for the jury prize for Best Film. Come on out, see some movies, support the artists, and stop by and say hi to me. And now, on with the show. When I was a kid, I was terrified I'd never turn 10 years old. I didn't have a deadly illness, and I didn't get into a horrible accident. I was terrified because I knew the world was going to end while I was 9 years old. Why? Well, the fundamentalist religion of my parents was partially based on numerology. The church leaders decoded passages in the Bible that they believed coincided with important historical dates. And then they used those dates to predict the year when Judgment Day would happen. Armageddon was coming that year, and God's army was going to destroy the wicked. This was an absolute certainty. And I knew I wasn't going to make the cut. My mother and my father and my little sister and all the church members believed without a doubt that Judgment Day was coming, and it was going to be a good day. But I was terrified of Judgment Day. It wasn't that I was an evil kid or anything like that, but I had something in my heart that was just as fatal as the 7 deadly sins. I had doubt. Try as hard as I might, I didn't believe like the rest of my family did, and I knew that with this God, doubt would not be tolerated, and I knew he could see right through me. So I think it's safe to say that my 10th birthday was met with mixed emotions in my house. The world did not end. And that was a profound disappointment to the faithful. Because believing that the world is coming to an end is not a passive sport. Belief on that level comes with personal sacrifice, just like Noah, just like Abraham. Ask yourself, if you truly believe that the world was coming to an end, would you keep it to yourself? If you knew a way to save people, would you stay silent? Could you stay silent? To do so would be a sin, wouldn't it? How much humiliation and isolation would you endure to save the ones you love? When the stakes are so high, how far will you cross the line to keep your children safe, even from themselves? Is there even a line to cross when your child's soul is at stake? There was a lot of collateral damage when the world did not end like it was supposed to. Church members had canceled medical appointments because they believed all their pain would soon be gone. And families were split apart by words and actions that were hard to forgive after the fact. But of course, this very public failure left the church and its leaders in disgrace, and the religion faded into history. Except, it did not fade into history. There was a period of shock and grief for true believers, and there was some soul-searching. And then, the church leaders made a statement that they may have gotten the date wrong, but all that meant was that Judgment Day could happen at any time now. Anybody with eyes could see that all the signs showed that we were in the last days. And everyone I knew, including my family, stayed in that religion. And decades later, the religion is as strong as ever, and the signs still point to the end of days. To those on the outside, I'm sure it sounds absurd. Why would anyone still believe after going through all of that pain and disgrace? But belief at that level of intensity does not die easily. It burrows deep inside of you. And even if you aren't one of the true believers, just being near all of it changes you too. Even if you are a doubter, some of it still burrows deep inside of you. Over the decades, there have been many movies that try to examine that moment when belief goes beyond the comfort zones of the rest of us. When the faithful boldly wade into unknown and unpredictable waters, a place where normal rules no longer apply, where faith requires risk, and belief itself has the threat of danger. Many of these films are thrillers that use real-life tragedies like the Jonestown Massacre in Guyana to tell a cautionary tale. Those movies might be intense, but in my opinion, they are very safe. They're about people being mesmerized by a charismatic leader, an obvious bad guy, a human being. It's not much of a risk to say cults are bad for you. The movies I want to talk about are ones that dare to make you uncomfortable by going on to hallowed ground. These movies examine head-on an idea that is usually touched on lightly, if at all, in most movies that deal with faith or religion. The fear of God. Now, I'm not talking about the spate of Christian horror movies like the Left Behind films. They speak of God and the apocalypse, but those movies have the feeling of wish fulfillment. There are bad guys, and there is judgment, and there is retribution, and there are no surprises. They're just as safe as the movies about doomed cults are. Both types of films cater to their target audiences. They preach to the converted. The movies I'm talking about are messy and unsettling because they don't treat faith and belief in a safe way. They fill you with dread. They fill you with doubt. And then all hell breaks loose. Because these movies realize that the most frightening thing that could happen to you while you say your prayers would be to have God talk back to you. Now, if you look in the Old Testament, back when God spoke to men, it's never good news. Most of the time, the men think they're going mad, and they're terrified. They see visions, and they have seizures where they speak in tongues, and they suddenly become obsessed with a mission that makes no sense, and they can't explain it to anyone. They are mocked and ostracized, and they lose everything to answer a voice only they hear. Sometimes the men are asked to do unspeakable things just to prove their obedience to God. The fear of God is palpable. Now, a little bit about that phrase, fear of God. It's defined as a sense of awe and of respect and of reverence and of submission to God. But it is also defined as the fear of divine punishment. It's the fear of offending God. If you look at the stories in the Old Testament, do these men do God's will because they revere him, or do they fear what will happen to them if they don't? In religious discussions, the fear of God is the elephant in the room. The movies I want to discuss assume that God never stopped talking. They remove the safety glass of ancient history and put you face to face with something that is fascinating in theory, but terrifying in reality. There's a quote by author Anthony Brandt that goes like this: "Other things may change us, but we start and end with the family. We are told that family, your blood family, will always be there for you. When trouble comes, it's your family that supports you. When you're a child, your family is your entire universe. Family is where you learn your values and right from wrong. And for many of us, especially boys, the father of the house is our first idea of God. He knows everything, and he's a teacher, and he upholds the rules, and he's the final word on what's true and what's not. We love him and fear him at the same time. He loves, and he punishes, and to a young boy, he is infallible. What could be more horrifying than finding out that God might be going mad? Would your family, your universe become a prison you couldn't escape. It's one point of view, but not the only point of view at the center of 2001's Frailty. The movie takes place on a rainy night in present-day Texas and in flashbacks to 1979. In the present day, there is a serial killer on the loose named the God's Hand Killer. And, on this dark and rainy night, a man named Fenton Meeks enters the FBI office of the agent in charge of the case with important information. It seems Fenton's brother, Adam, is the God's Hand Killer, and Fenton wants to tell the story of his brother to the chief investigating agent. The agent is understandably skeptical because answers don't just walk in the door. But Fenton has brought proof in the back of a stolen ambulance, his brother's dead body. This gets the agent to listen as Fenton tells a story of his and his brother's childhood. A childhood that reveals that being the God's Hand Killer might be a family tradition. The flashback story revolves around a father and his two sons who live in a small Texas town. Dad's an auto mechanic who is raising his sons on his own after their mother died. Fenton is the older brother, but still a preteen, and Adam is still very much a child. The family dynamic is realistic. Dad is warm but firm. He treats Fenton differently than he does Adam because he's old enough to be responsible. Adam still gets the goofy dad, but Fenton gets the pragmatic dad who expects more of him. This family life is blandly and comfortably normal. And then, one night, Dad wakes the kids in a frantic state. Dad says he was awakened by the visitation of an angel. He is told that God has chosen him and his sons with a divine mission. It is their purpose on this earth. He says that the angel showed him a vision that the end of days has started and that the devil has released demons in the world to do battle. God wants Dad to cleanse the earth of demons. There are only a few problems. First, nobody else knows about the demons. Secondly, the demons are disguised to look and act like people. And if you tell anyone about the divine mission, if anyone finds out, someone will die. As viewers, we only know as much as the boys do. We don't see any angelic visitation. All we see is a weird glare off a bowling trophy that might be caused by a passing car's headlights. And that lack of proof, that lack of the supernatural, and how scared Dad seems is unsettling. Adam is young enough to believe whatever Dad believes. Why would his God lie to him? But Fenton is old enough to realize something is very wrong with Dad. The father he knows is level-headed and practical, and this behavior is erratic and illogical. Dad usually has all the answers, but now he has no answers to Fenton's questions. The only thing his father knows for certain is that God sent an angel to speak to him and that more instructions would come from God soon. He believes this without any doubt in his heart. And just like that, Fenton's life comes crashing down. Think of being a kid, too old to believe in fairy tales, but too young to take care of yourself. And the man you depend on may have just lost his mind. You are powerless. A few days later, Dad gets another message from God. He gets a list of names of demons who are disguised as people, and he must destroy them. And Dad starts bringing home holy relics, weapons given to him by God to fight the demons. These holy relics are a lead pipe, a pair of work gloves, and a double-sided axe. And then Dad brings home a demon he captured. He needs his sons to bear witness. He needs them to know he's not killing a human being. But we see a bound, gagged, and bloodied woman in the barn. Dad says that's a disguise. He says that when he touches them with his bare hands, the demon is revealed. And Dad reaches out his bare hand. And he grabs the woman by the arm, and he screams as if an electric current goes right through him. He sees the demon. Adam says he sees the demon. Fenton does not. Nevertheless, the demon is destroyed right in front of him. As you can probably tell, there's a whole lot of wrong happening here, but that's just the start of the madness. Fenton stands up to his father and tells him he's sick in the head and that he needs help. His dad is horrified. Why doesn't Fenton see the demons? Why is his son defying the word of God? The angel gives the father an answer he does not want to hear. Fenton is one of the demons. Now, this could have just been a variation on the killer cult movies with Dad as a stand-in for Jim Jones, but this movie is ambiguous about whether Dad is insane or touched by actual divinity. There's an example early in the movie where Dad is at work in his garage. He's lying on a mechanic's creeper working underneath the car. Someone nearby is using a metal grinder and sparks bounce around the father, and suddenly the undercarriage of the car transforms into a cathedral, and an angel with a flaming sword floats down towards him. And then we cut to a wide shot of everyone working in the garage going about their business, unaware of any epiphanies in the area. And Dad lies there under the car, not moving. Which point of view is reality? The father's not bloodthirsty, and he takes his divine calling deadly serious and follows the rules that God has given him, many rules, without question. Because of this, he feels he's doing nothing wrong. In many ways, he's the same highly moral and consistent man he was before God came into his life. And Dad is far from a criminal mastermind. He has no plan. It's as if he is getting his ideas and information from an unseen presence. Even though he lives in the middle of nowhere, he gets in his car and drives into a city he's never been to, goes to a house he's never seen before, and knocks on the door. And the person who opens the door is on his demon list. And even though he's clumsy and unprepared, he remains unseen and unnoticed. At one point, he abducts a man in a crowded supermarket parking lot in broad daylight. Fenton says that they're going to get caught, and Dad says that God will keep them hidden. And they abduct the man without anyone seeing them. And what about Fenton in the present, telling this story on a rainy night in an FBI office? What is the point of him telling this story, and why does he make us so nervous? Well, you'll have to watch the movie to find out. And the last 10 minutes will reveal a movie you may not have realized you were watching. I went to see Frailty in its opening weekend and didn't know anything about it except it was a horror movie. And sometimes when you're watching a movie, an anxiety, a raw nerve specific to you can be poked. And this movie took me back to an unhappy time in my childhood when my doubt over the religion I was in direct battle with the faith of the rest of my family. There's a moment in Frailty where Fenton refuses to pray anymore, and he tells his father that there is no God. Dad tries to save his son from God's wrath by punishing him, trying to force the demon from him. This involves psychological and physical abuse. Fenton is forced to dig his own prison in the backyard, and he is banished to stay in that underground prison until God speaks to him and forgives him. He is only given a glass of water a day to survive on in the hot Texas sun. Fenton's younger brother sides with his dad, and that means Fenton is alone in this ordeal. And Dad loves his son, and he is truly pained having to do this, but his son's soul is on the line. The stakes are too high. God is watching. Now, I was never locked in a hole in the backyard, and my dad wasn't killing people for God. But the emotions that were on display, the pain of a misguided belief alienating you from your family, that feeling of truly being alone in the world rang so damn true. And the pain of a family ripping apart over something as unknowable and unprovable and so fundamentally important as faith brought back survivors' grief and guilt. As the movie credits rolled and everybody made their way to the lobby, I found myself getting dizzy. I had to lean up against a wall while the crowd made plans for drinks or a late dinner, and then I looked across the lobby and saw another man just as emotionally spent as I was. We made eye contact, and like survivors who share a secret, we rushed towards each other to talk. The name of the movie is just as ambiguous and abstract as the film. Frailty can refer to the frailty of faith, or the frailty of family trust, or the frailty of sanity, or the frailty of old scars over deep, deep wounds. The movie Frailty is told through a character who watches helplessly as someone they love changes into something frightening and dangerous. The next movie is told through a character that helplessly watches themselves turn into something scary and dangerous. When God talks, we normally think of a booming voice from the heavens or a flaming sword, but the Bible has a lot of examples of a subtler form of communication. Visions and dreams, portents of things to come. In fact, it was so common in the Bible that the lack of visions was commented upon as a problem, because the vision, the dream, was God's personal favorite. Maybe it still is. Joan of Arc saw visions that centered a war to free France from England. Several religions have started based on visions, and yes, there are murderers who say visions from God commanded them to kill. Of course, even devout Christians realize that not everyone who says that they've had visions is telling the truth. And we also know that some of the mentally ill believe completely that they are having visions, but it is their illness talking. I often wonder, going on the assumption that there is a God for the sake of the story, are there people who silently sit in terror, assuming that they are slipping into madness? We see a man standing in the driveway of his house. He is looking up at the sky, and there is a huge storm cloud swirling above him. It starts to rain, and he looks at his hands. The rain is thick and brown and viscous, like fresh motor oil. He stands in the rain, and he looks up into the sky. Even though nothing happens, we see that he is scared. It is a dream, the first of several increasingly disturbing and threatening dreams in the movie Take Shelter. I see Take Shelter as a creepy meditation on what it would be like to start having visions in the modern world. God is never mentioned, but by the end of this film, you'll probably be thinking about the story of Noah. The story takes place in Ohio and follows Curtis LaForge and his wife and his daughter. Curtis is a stoic Midwesterner who speaks little and shows emotions even less. He's a construction foreman, and his social circle only extends to his coworkers. He's quietly dependable, the kind of guy that lives his life for his family and his family alone. His stable job gives him a home, just enough cash for a vacation cabin rental, and great health insurance to get corrective surgery for his deaf daughter. At one point, his best friend and coworker says, "You got a good life, Curtis. I guess that's the best compliment a man can give another man." Famous last words. Also, the perfect parable setup, just like Job, just like Noah. God seems to abhor when people have their shit together. Curtis continues to have recurring nightmares about a storm, but they are more than just normal nightmares. And he can't shake the fear he felt, and it follows him through the day. It's like the images in the nightmare haunt him. They keep talking to him. If he gets hurt in a dream, he feels the pain linger throughout the day. He's not sure what's real. Curtis doesn't tell anyone, including his wife, just how deeply the dreams are affecting him. But he is oversleeping, and he becomes sharp and distant to his family. And then Curtis starts to have visions, waking dreams. He sees a huge flock of birds flying in an ominous pattern, but nobody else sees them. He hears thunder when there's not a cloud in the sky. And the nightmares get scarier, and shadowy figures attack the family. And the storm in the nightmare becomes apocalyptic, a storm to end the world. And Curtis's normally dependable behavior starts to get erratic and illogical. And yet he stays quiet, even when his wife knows something is wrong. We find out that he has his reasons. His mother was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic and put into an institution for life. And that happened when she was about the age he is right now. And Curtis is terrified that the same might be happening to him. And this is where the movie is so brilliant and terrifying. Because in the Bible, when the visions start, the person is said to be compelled by the Spirit. And in this movie, even though Curtis is aware that dreams can't hurt you, and selling the dog because he bit you in a dream makes no sense, and ending a friendship because that person attacked you in a dream is crazy, he is still compelled to do so. Compulsion. I had a friend who was diabetic, and when her blood sugar spiked, you knew it. You'd be talking, and suddenly she'd say something really unsettling or look at you very funny. And you'd have to tell her that she was having an attack and that she needed insulin because she had no idea. A seamless chemical switch had been flipped, and her brain never felt a thing. And that's the terrifying thing about schizophrenia, or visions from God. In this movie, Curtis is his stoic self, but suddenly a switch flips inside, and neither he, nor the other characters, nor we the audience knows it, until he starts doing more and more erratic and self-destructive and family-destructive things. He is aware after the fact that what he's done is madness, but only after the fact. It is as if he has no defense against the compulsion to do the crazy things he does, like spending all of his savings and losing his job to dig a hole in his yard to make an underground shelter for an apocalyptic storm that only exists in his nightmares. This movie does not let you off easily. You are there with Curtis through all of his nightmares. You are there with Curtis as the compulsion takes over again and again. You are there with Curtis when his wife breaks down because she can't trust him anymore. You are there when the nightmares start happening while he's awake. And you are there when all hell breaks loose. Like Frailty, the last 10 minutes of this movie will make your jaw drop. And Take Shelter will keep you guessing until the last frame on whether it was madness or God talking. When I discuss, in a very general manner, my childhood in an end-of-the-world religion, I usually get one of two responses. The first is, thank God it wasn't a suicide cult, which I agree with wholeheartedly. The second, after I get some weird sympathy, is, I just can't understand how anyone could fall into a cult like that. Of course, it's hard to relate to people who change their names to follow someone who says they're an alien. And that's what we focus on when we look at a cult, the bizarre aspect to it. We naturally look at the differences when we are confronted with something outside of our comfort zones. But it's not that weird thing that sticks out like a sore thumb that draws people into cults. It's something much more universal, something we are all susceptible to. Despair. Disillusionment, desperation. It's that feeling when the systems you trust let you down and nobody else seems to notice or care. It's that helplessness when you feel like a stranger in a world that is going mad. It's the loneliness and the emptiness of being powerless. Most cults or radical religions tell you that you are right to feel this way. The systems you trusted did let you down. Intentionally or unintentionally, the church and state you believed in has lost their way. They no longer speak for God, or for the earth, or for the people. You're special because you noticed. Context is everything. When my family joined the fundamentalist religion, it was after their church let them down during a family crisis. It was also a time of political assassinations, and the Watts riots, and campus shootings, and Cambodia's Year Zero, and bomb threats in elementary schools. It was also when my family life was falling apart and my mother was losing her mind over it. In the early 1970s, anyone with eyes could see we were in the last days. The next movie I want to talk about is one of the best films to capture the despair of feeling alone and without purpose in your life. It also shows the allure of finding something to believe in. And it also shows the dangers of zealotry and reliance on prophecy. And it also gives you Armageddon, literally. Michael Tolkien's The Rapture is the rare film that examines belief and the fear of God from both sides of the conversation. And because of that, he pissed everybody off. People hated the movie either because it said religion was fake or because it said religion was real. But I don't think The Rapture does either of those things. I think what The Rapture gives you is doubt. The fear of being wrong, no matter what you believe. The story follows Sharon, a woman who lives a life of pure sensation and sexual gratification. She trolls hotel bars for swinger couples to play with. With every one of these couplings, She finds a deep loneliness at her center. This movie shows loneliness as full of silence and repetition and darkness. What I liked about this movie is that Sharon doesn't find God because of a tragic event. It's because there is no event, and every day is the same lonely despair that she seeks God. Her conversion is gradual, and it starts after a few chance encounters fill her with curiosity. She overhears a group of coworkers whispering about the dreams, the boy, and the pearl. When they realize she's listening, they go quiet. Then, during one of her swinger parties, she notices a full back tattoo on the woman she picked up. It is full of religious imagery, but in the center of her back is a large pearl. We find out that this woman was trapped in a religious sect as a child, and this tattoo was forced upon her. When Sharon asks what it all means, the woman says, "Don't you know what's going on? The dream, the pearl? It's a message from God." And then 2 missionaries show up at her apartment. She asks them about the pearl and the boy. They aren't part of that sect, but when that is brought up, they grow deadly serious. Who is the boy? Some people say he's a prophet in the old tradition. Some people say there's others like him all around the country, all around the world. Sharon asks the missionary, "Well, what do you say?" "What do I say? I say trust in God." Sharon's life continues its mundane and lonely trajectory until she has the dream about the pearl. We meet the prophet, a young preteen boy who is so shy he whispers into the ear of his translator as he meets with his small congregation. His words are familiar. "We are in the last days. There are wars and rumors of wars. Anyone with eyes can see that the end is coming." But this prophet doesn't say it's going to happen tomorrow. He says it will be years, maybe 7 or 8, before Armageddon starts. During the wait for the apocalypse, Sharon converts to this religious sect and gets married, and she has a daughter. She has that piety that keeps her polite but detached from the rest of the world. In reality, she's the same extremist she was when she was a hedonistic swinger. Whatever it is she believes, she's immersed. She is all in. And then the world comes crushing down. Sharon's husband is senselessly murdered, and she seems to take it in blissful stride, knowing that they will be reunited soon. And that pious stare and blissful smile, it becomes pathological. She has visions of the desert and becomes convinced that she and her daughter are being called there by God. She is convinced that the rapture is about to begin and that it will start in the desert. They will hear Gabriel's trumpets, and they will ascend, and the family will be reunited. She's so sure this is going to happen, she's not concerned about packing any food. They drive out to the desert, and the rapture does not come that night. They wake up and pray, and the rapture does not come. A week goes by. The daughter is weak from hunger and hallucinating all night. Or are they visions? Is God speaking through her daughter when she says her mother should kill her? And where this movie goes from there is riveting and tragic and ultimately terrifying. Just when you think the movie has said its piece and that it's sewn things up neatly, there's another surprise, because the movie is messy and it challenges 100% belief or 100% disbelief. I got an email from a listener a while back that talked about my episode about heavy metal. The email was entitled, "As a Metalhead and a Catholic, I Want to Thank You." In that email, he talked about how, in the way he was brought up in his religion, doubt is considered healthy. He said it never seemed to be a contradiction to be a believer and still listen to King Diamond sing "Nuns Have No Fun." He argued that cognitive dissonance is part and parcel with being Catholic, that the things that are real about faith stand the test of questioning. In other words, questioning and introspection are healthy exercises for the truth. As a kid who grew up in a religion where doubt was as deadly as murder, I tend to agree with my listener. I think that one of the great gifts that horror movies give you is a safe release to examine the things you fear. We face our fears, and we come out the other side alive, even if it's the fear of God. And thanks for listening to the show. Hellbent for Horror was written and broadcast by me, S.A. Bradley, and produced by me and Lisa Gorski. You can find more on our website, hellbentforhorror.com, and I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/hellbentforhorror, and my Twitter handle is hellbenthorror. You can find Hellbent for Horror on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, and other podcast platforms. And H4H has its own app. You can download it from the Google or Amazon store for Android, and the iPhone version is available on the iTunes store. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay hell-bent.